Thank you all very much for being here. I'm Mike Thompson, and I chair the Gun Violence Prevention Task Force. I want to thank our leader, Hakeem Jeffries, and all my colleagues for their work to advance common sense gun violence prevention legislation. Every day, 30 people are killed by someone using a gun. If you add accidents and suicides, that number jumps up to 100 people every day. And we've had more mass shootings this year than we've had days of the year this year. Not only have we lost lives and turned communities upside down, the annual cost to taxpayers of gun violence is almost $660 billion. $660 billion. Democrats are working to make our communities safer. Republicans are trying to reverse the actions that we've already been successful in and make it easier to inflict carnage. The last time they were in the majority, they tried to allow for the sale of silencers, over-the-counter sale of silencers. And they're doubling down this time. They're back in charge. We're trying to make the community safer, and they've got a bill on the floor that would allow for an aftermarket device to be added to an already menacing short-barrel assault pistol to make it function like a rifle. So it's already deadly, it's already killing people, and this brace thing that they're trying to make legal would make it more lethal and more accurate. Their leadership is not working for safer communities, and we need to do something about this. Moms across the country are with us, dads across the country are with us, students and young people across the country are with us. And the Gun Violence Prevention Task Force, in coordination with our leadership, is leading a charge to get gun violence prevention legislation, all of which enjoy overwhelming support across our great nation. We're filing discharge petitions for my Bipartisan Background Check Act with Representative Fitzpatrick, Representative Jim Clyburn's bill to enhance background checks, and Representative McBath's bill to ban assault weapons. If we're able to get just a handful of Republicans to join us, we can make our communities safer. We can make it safe for people to go to church, to pray, to go to the supermarket, to go to a music venue, to go to school. This is important. And leading our effort, and I'm proud to introduce him today, is our great Democratic leader from the state of New York, Leader Jeffries.
Well, thank you, Chairman Thompson, for your incredible leadership, and I want to thank the Gun Violence Prevention Task Force and Jim Clyburn and Lucy McBath and, of course, Abigail Spanberger, everyone, Pat Ryan, others who will be speaking here today for your steadfast leadership and commitment. I want to thank all of our incredible advocates who have dedicated their lives, their efforts, their heart and soul to ending the gun violence epidemic here in America. And as House Democrats, we're committed to doing the same thing. We will not rest until we end gun violence in the United States of America. That is our goal, period, full stop. It should shock the conscience that gun violence is the leading cause of death for children in this country. America, the greatest country in the history of the world, should not be in a situation where our young people are afraid to go to school, where people have to live in fear in terms of going to the synagogue or the mosque or the church or to a mall or to a concert. We are better than that as a country, and we're determined to address this crisis. And that's why I'm so thankful that the Gun Violence Prevention Task Force, joining with our advocates and our allies from all across the country, are launching this effort through these discharge petitions to make sure that we will not allow people to talk like they want to end gun violence in America, but do nothing about it. Which is why We have these discharge petitions that are live right now to allow people to make it clear to America that we're determined to do everything necessary, like universal criminal background check legislation, like closing the Charleston loophole, and making sure that we rid assault weapons from the streets of the United States of America. And let's be clear, these assault weapons, these weapons of war, they're not used to hunt deer. They're used to hunt human beings and children, and they have no place in a civilized society. And so we're urging our Republican colleagues, just a handful of you can join with us as Democrats to take meaningful steps to save lives in the United States of America. And we will continue to urge them to do just that. And together, I'm confident that as long as we continue to show up and speak up and stand up, that we will end the gun violence epidemic here in the United States of America. That is our promise. That is our commitment. That is our charge. Let's go get that done.
When do we want it?
Now we're going to hear from our fantastic colleague, a victim of gun violence herself, someone who's suffered greatly and taken that pain and turned it into positive action to make communities safe across the country, Lucy McBath.
Good afternoon, and thank each and every one of you for being here today. Today marks a new step in our journey to ending gun violence here in America. My colleagues and I have just filed discharge petitions to force Republican leadership to bring common sense gun safety legislation to the House floor. After the conviction of my son's killer, I made a promise to my son on the courthouse steps, and I made a promise to survivors like myself all around America. I promised I would take all that love, all of that conviction, all of that care that I'd given my son as a mother, that sense of protection for my son, that I would spend the rest of my life devoting to making sure that mothers and fathers across this country never, ever, ever have to suffer the kind of loss that I have, and so many survivors that stand behind us. And when I came to Congress in 2019, I came to fulfill that promise. Today, we continue that fight. This year alone, we've experienced more mass shootings than there have been days in the calendar. How can we continue to accept this as the status quo? Do you accept that as the status quo? How can we explain our inaction to our children who are living with the daily fear of being murdered in their classrooms? This is unconscionable, and they deserve better than this. How can we in good conscience send our children off to school day after day into a world where becoming a victim of gun violence is not only a significant risk, but a statistical likelihood here in America? That is why we have filed today's discharge petitions, because we have been sent to the House of Representatives to use every tool that is made available to us to find solutions that will save American lives. And we refuse, and I say it again, we refuse to let the power of the NRA gun lobby stand in our way. I am Very grateful to my colleagues that stand with me here and all that have supported these measures. Very grateful for their support of this life-saving work. Leaders like Speaker Emerita Nancy Pelosi, who has been an absolute champion for gun violence prevention her entire career and presided over the historic passage of the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act. Veterans like Congressman Pat Ryan, who served during the Iraq War and knows firsthand what these weapons can do and why weapons of war do not belong in our streets and our communities. Activists like Congressman Maxwell Frost, who grew up under the ever-growing threat of gun violence in our schools and became the national organizing director for March for Our Lives, and other champions like Sheila Jackson Lee and Judy Chu and Robin Kelly and others who have been on the front lines of this effort. I'm also humbled to be joined by my friends from our community. Americans who are sick and tired of the inaction from the Republican Party. A party who would rather offer thoughts and prayers instead of meaningful policy. Thoughts and prayers are not stopping the carnage in this country.
No.
And if that is all that you have to offer survivors like myself, I leave you with this. Faith without works is dead. Prayers without action are hollow.
That's right.
It's common sense solutions that saves lives. It's policies that will fulfill the dreams for our children and our families to live in a world freely, unfettered by unnecessary gun violence. That is our charge. And this is what the American people deserve. And at this time, it is my honor to introduce my friend and the Assistant Democratic Leader, Jim Clyburn.
Thank you. Thank you very, very much. And thanks to all of my colleagues and thanks to all of our advocates who are here today. Come Saturday, June 17th, we are going to commemorate the 8th anniversary of the shooting at Emmanuel AME Church. Yes. And I'm very pleased to see our bishop here, Pastor McKenzie, with us today. Background checks, thankfully, to the Brady Act are mandated, and we have them. The problem is that the vast majority of those checks can be completed within minutes. 97% of them can be completed within the mandated 3 days. The big problem is that 3%. That 3%, for whatever reason, it may be that someone made a mistake, and it could be the intentions of the purchaser that causes the error. That is what I've always believed was the issue with the young man that bought the gun, that murdered those 9 souls who were in prayer in the basement of their church. They found the error, but by the time they found it, the 3 days had expired. He had the gun. He had done the research, looking for the most historic African-American church in the state. And he went there, worshiped for several days with those members. But on this particular night, they let him into their worship because he had been there before. They had no idea what was on his mind. And he killed 9 of them, injured 3 others, and then said to one, I'm going to spare you so you can carry the message. That kind of hate should not be allowed to purchase a weapon. His record was such that he would not have been able to purchase the weapon. But because of the error, either unwittingly or intentionally, he was not discovered until it was too late. One of the discharge petitions that we have filed today will close that Charleston loophole and will allow 10 days for the background check to take place. And if it's not completed, the purchaser can apply for another 10 days and ask the FBI to come in and do an extensive research. And then, only then, will the purchase will be allowed. That, to me, is common sense. And that's what this petition is all about. And I'm pleased now to yield to our Democratic whip, Ms. Catherine Clark.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, Assistant Leader Clyburn, for your inspiring words and your work to close this deadly loophole. And thanks to my friend Mike Thompson, whose vision for a gun violence-free future remains our caucus's North Star. And to Lucy McBath, whose strength channels so many parents and families around this country who've had to draw immeasurable courage from unimaginable pain. We are so grateful to you, Lucy, and to every member of the Gun Violence Prevention Task Force. These leaders embody the best of this institution because their mission is premised on a basic truth. Our kids matter more than our guns. Yes. When did the other side of the aisle lose track of that truth? When did extremism ingrain itself so deeply in the Republican Party that anything could possibly matter more than our children? How can you look at a church basement devastated like a battlefield? How can you look at a bloodied dance floor, a bullet-ridden classroom, then come to this building, to our nation's capital, and do nothing?
Yeah. Right.
MAGA extremists have chosen to turn their backs on the American people. And every single day that they refuse to act, they abandon another 117 Americans to a violent death. Unlike the MAGA GOP, Democrats are here to fulfill our oath of office. We're here to side with moms and dads and students and teachers and co-workers and law enforcement, not the NRA. And last year, we enacted the most sweeping gun safety law in nearly 3 decades. But this year, today, Republicans are voting to expand access to weapons of war.
No!
During Gun Violence Awareness Month, on the same week as our 2 heart-wrenching anniversaries, the Pulse nightclub and Mother Emanuel Church. How cruel can you possibly be? So once again, Democrats are coming forward with solutions. If there is still any shame left in the Republican conference, if there is an ounce of regret, this is your chance to do something about it. Join us. Bring this legislation to the floor. Make a choice to put our kids over guns. And now it is my honor to introduce an unrivaled champion for the children. The leader who gavelled our Safer Communities Act into law, our trailblazing Speaker Emerita, Nancy Pelosi.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Madam Whip. Thank you and our distinguished leader and the chair of the caucus and all of the leadership for enabling us to have these motions of discharge petitions on the floor. 3 of them now that Congresswoman Lucy McBath mentioned. That is because the leadership has seen the value of doing that. Thank you so much to our leadership for that. As has been mentioned, Mr. Clyburn mentioned the sad anniversary this Saturday, Madam Bishop, thank you for honoring us with your presence. As was mentioned earlier this week in this early part of this month, the Pulse. We saw Lucy McBath speak with such grace and such grit about her determination, her pledge in memory of her son. And that's what we have heard from other survivors as well. We have the privilege to serve with her, to hear her determination and her leadership on this issue, that this should not happen to anyone else, to anyone else's child. Moms demand action. Children, generation lockdown, taking responsibility. Isn't it a shame for our country that gun violence is the cause of more deaths for children in our country than any other cause? What is it that will persuade our colleagues? I don't think it's just the NRA. I think it's the gun industry making unfathomable money from this, making big money, and they don't have to answer for it. But whatever it is, I'll just close by saying this. To these members of Congress who refuse to sign our discharge petition or refuse to allow gun violence prevention legislation coming to the floor, stop your cowardice. Stop your being so frightened of the fact that every child in our country, survival is more important than your political survival. Give us a vote. Give our children a chance. Give our children a chance. And thank you to all of the groups. You've heard them mentioned and named here, because the outside mobilization is what's going to help us get the job done for the children. Our promise to you is we will not stop until the job is done. I want to thank Mike Thompson for his leadership of our task force, to Lucy McBath for her, just the glory of being associated with her leadership. Thank you, Lucy McBath. It is an honor to serve with you. Thank you for your leadership, for your courage, for your grace, and thank you all. We're not stopping until the job is done. And now it's my privilege to yield to the distinguished Congresswoman from Virginia, a leader on this issue, Abigail Spanberger.
Thank you, Madam Speaker Emerita. Thank you for being here today. Thank you to all the advocates, all the survivors, and everyone who believes that we can do more to protect our children. I stand before you as a member of Congress, a former federal agent who carried a firearm every day, and a mother of 3 school-aged children. And after the Uvalde shooting, my daughter cried and cried and cried and cried and said those children must have been so scared. And she spoke about what it would have been like for those kids. And as her parent, I had to console her. And as a legislator, I had to come back to this place, meet with my colleagues, and say, again, we must do more.
That's right.
We filed discharge petitions on the Bipartisan Background Checks Act. It is named such because it is bipartisan in its introduction, and it is overwhelmingly bipartisan in the number of Americans who support it. We filed a discharge petition on the Enhanced Background Checks Act, Mr. Clyburn's bill, which would save lives, and lives have been lost because of the loophole that exists in the current law. And we filed the discharge petition on the assault weapons ban because we know that when weapons that are meant for war are utilized in classrooms and in churches and in synagogues and in grocery stores and on parade routes and in our communities, they result in massive numbers of Americans dying. And the American people deserve better. Yes. And we know that there are actions that we can take, and that's why we are here to ask our colleagues to join us. Join us. Tell us what you are for. We are giving you 3 options today. Join us. Sign the petitions. And as a Congresswoman, I signed 3 petitions today in honor of little girls who have been murdered in my district. And in honor of Markia and Lucia, I will continue to work to prevent future parents, future families, and future Americans from knowing the horror of gun violence. And now it is my pleasure to introduce Maxwell Alejandro Frost, who is an extraordinary advocate and new member of Congress.
How's everybody doing? Thank you so much to all the advocates and organizers and leaders in the movement that are here today. Oftentimes I'm asked why I decided to get involved in politics, and it happened at the age of 15 for one simple reason: I didn't want to get shot in my school. It was the Sandy Hook shooting that really put me into getting involved in this fight. And little did I know, 3 years later, after the Sandy Hook shooting and after I dedicated my life to ending gun violence, I'd survived an instance of gun violence myself in Orlando, Florida. And just yesterday, we commemorated the 7th anniversary of when somebody walked into Pulse nightclub and murdered 49 angels. It was armed bigotry, it was armed hate, it was armed homophobia. That's right. And what we know to be true is this. We hear our colleagues, they'll use this line all the time. People kill people. Guns don't kill people, people kill people. It is for that very reason that we need to ban assault weapons in this country, because people kill people. I remember when we found out what gun was used in the mass shooting in Pulse that devastated my community. When we learned that it was an assault weapon, the first thing I said is we need to ban those weapons of war in our streets. We need to ensure the safety of our people. And for my colleagues that are worried about their political future, I asked them to look at the state of Florida, where after somebody walked into Marjorie Stoneman Douglas and murdered 17 people, sweeping reform was passed. Every Republican that voted yes on it was reelected that year. So don't come to us with the excuse of your own political calculation why you can't stand up for the people. We live in a country where the leading cause of death, if you are a child in this country, the most likely reason that you would die early, God forbid, is because of a bullet. That's unacceptable. That's unacceptable. You know, when I think about the work that we're doing, when I think about people like Representative Lucy McBath and a lot of the folks that are here today organizing, who have either experienced gun violence firsthand or lost a loved one, but took that tragedy and turned it into action. There is nothing more courageous than that. There is nothing more courageous than that. And all you have to do is step into that chamber and sign your name. Sign your name for the hundreds of people who are shot a day in this country. Sign your name for the 100 people that will lose their life today because of senseless gun violence. Sign your name for your family, for yourself, because the bullets don't care if you're Democrat or Republican. This is about the people versus the problem. And the question here for every single member of the House of Representatives is, which side are you on? The NRA and the gun lobby and the corporate money that's getting into our elections, keeping us from passing the legislation that we need, or the people? Or the people. When I need courage, I think about our elders and the people who have been doing this fight for a long time. And I think about the late, great Congresswoman Barbara Jordan, who said what the people want is simple: a country as great as its promise. That promise includes safety. That promise means that you can go to the store, the church, or even be in your own home and not fear being gunned down. Whether it's in a mass shooting in your school or the greatest mass shooting that happens every day in our black and brown communities in this country. We have so much work to do, but I know that together, because of the people around me right now and because of the people at home that are fighting on a daily basis, whether it's community violence intervention or passing the laws that we need to ensure that we get these weapons of war off our street, we will end gun violence, because we will not stop fighting. Thank you. And next, I'm privileged to introduce my next colleague, who is a veteran, who I think brings a voice to this that is very much needed, Congressman Pat Ryan.
Good afternoon, everybody. I know it's hot. I know we've been out here for a long time, but we have to keep up the pressure. And I want to thank especially the survivors. I know many of whom are standing in front of me and behind me, that for multiple days last week, literally with clouds of smog choking them, camped out here on the Senate side of the Capitol and said, we are not quitting. We have seen this firsthand. We have seen our homes and our families and our communities ripped apart, and we are turning that tragedy, just like Lucy, and thank you for your leadership, Lucy, turning that tragedy into action and leadership. This is a leadership moment. A moment where we're seeing new colleagues that have been here a long time, saying, we're not going to stick by the old rules. We're not going to wait for Kevin McCarthy, his MAGA extremist allies, who all day long lecture about public safety and crime. You want to talk about public safety? Let's stop having our kids gunned down by the same weapons that I carried in combat for 27 months. That's public safety. Since I've come home from serving, I have two young boys now, a 1.5 and 4-year-old. And to think about the fact that I spent 27 months trying to keep our country safe, risking my life, losing friends, losing fellow soldiers, to come home to my own community and see our streets feel like we are in a war zone. That's not who we are as a country. That's not the American dream that all of us work and fight so hard for. So we have to take this action that you've heard my colleagues talk about. And again, I just want to reiterate the message to all of our colleagues, regardless of party. Are you a leader? Are you a leader? And I'll even say it. However, I'm surely, if we can get to the floor, going to vote yes. But even if you're going to vote the wrong way on this, Republicans, at least have the backbone, have the courage to do it publicly, to say what your values are. Show the American people where you stand or where you don't. Don't be a coward. So I want to thank you all for being here, and to all my colleagues. And now it is my honor to introduce Bishop Vashti Murphy McKenzie to join us and add to the voice. Bishop, thank you so much for being here.
I'm here today to applaud the representatives and senators who have stood here this afternoon for displaying uncommon courage. They had the courage to stand up for the children of the United States of America when there are others who failed to stand up for them. We stand here today in the shadow of the citadel of power, of people who have the power to do this and to make it right. We need to stand up for worshipers, for shoppers, for dancers, for Americans, and for our school children. There was a young child in Chicago, Illinois, who wrote his letter to his family. In case I don't come home, I want you to know that I love you. I thank you for standing with me, for feeding me, clothing me, and carrying me. No school-age child should have to write a letter in case they don't come home.
That's right.
No parent should have to hug their child and release them to school not knowing if they're going to come home. No spouse, no aunt, no uncle, no niece or nephew should have to do that. And so, with us in the National Council of Churches, we applaud these representatives with uncommon courage. But there is another woman that has uncommon courage. Yes, it is Congresswoman Lucy McBath. But in my faith tradition, there was another woman who went to bat for her child. The Syrophoenician woman. Her child was in trouble, and she went to the place of power to ask for help. She was denied the first time. And so just because you denied us last time or the other year, just because you denied us at Sandy Hook and in Emmanuel AME Church. We will not give up. We will persist like that woman. And at the end, she was applauded for her faith and her prayers were answered. We, the people, serve a God of love, serve a God who's on the oppressed, side of the oppressed, and we serve a God of peace and a God of justice. Come now and let peace and justice reign. Put your hands together and applaud these uncommon, courageous men and women who serve the United States of America. Thank you. And I now present Dr. Joseph Saccharin. This is our lane, Vice Chair of Brady Board. Give him a hand.
Good afternoon. It's great to be here, and hard to follow the bishop. And I just want to echo the fact that we are standing here with so many of the advocates that have been pounding the pavement day in and day out. And it's because of you that we've been able to culturally transform our nation. But it's not enough. I come to this conversation today not just as a survivor of gun violence, but also someone that is on the other side of the equation as a trauma surgeon, having to take care of these patients that are injured and killed on a daily basis in cities like Baltimore, cities where we see a disproportionate impact on young brown and black men. And while I love what I do as a trauma surgeon, the reality is that when someone comes into our trauma center and is shot in the head, there's very little that we can do as healthcare professionals to bring that person back to baseline. And that's why in my role with the Brady Board, we work beyond the bedside to provide the best medical treatment to this public health problem, and that's prevention. You know, we've heard how the leading cause of death for children and adolescents is gun violence. Just think about that for a second. It's not poisoning, it's not cancer, it's not car fatalities, it's literally bullets. And the reality is that we live in a time where we are having this conversation in a way that is so sanitized. I hear people talking about it all the time. Oh, another shooting. These aren't shootings. These are massacres. That's right. And guess who gets to see the carnage? It's a small sliver of people. It's the children that are in those schools. It's the parents that have to identify their kids, some of which are unidentifiable. And it's the frontline providers, law enforcement, medical examiners, and healthcare professionals that are seeing and taking care of these patients every day. And the rest of America is a little bit oblivious to this carnage. We are facing one of the most important public health problems of modern time. That's right. And here's what I'll tell you is I love what I do, but the worst part of my job is having to walk into a waiting room and talk to moms like Congresswoman McBath and have to explain to them that their child that left that morning is never coming home again. Is this the America that we want to live in?
No, it's not.
No.
We have an opportunity and a responsibility to act today. We have an opportunity for Congress to do something that will make communities safer. Healthcare professionals have a message for Congress. Stop filling our trauma centers with your thoughts and prayers. Okay? It's time that we put children above guns, and it's time to act now. Thank you very much. I'd like to introduce our last speaker, Jordan Gomes from Newtown Action Alliance and Sandy Hook survivor. Jordan.
All right, y'all, I'm gonna keep it short because there's something else going on right after this and I'm not trying to get in trouble. But I'm not gonna come here today and ask you guys to put yourselves in my shoes because that's hardly ever worked for me, especially in speaking with Republicans. I'm gonna ask you to think of your children. We've got some Moms Demand people here. Raise your hand if you've got kids, please. Think of your children in your heads right now, say their names, and think of how you love them like nobody else can. Think of the funny nicknames that you might call them. Do their drawings hang on your fridge? Do their pictures sit on your desks? And then I want you to put them in my shoes. I want you to think of them at their elementary school on a cold December Friday. Their choir concert had happened the night before, and when they had left, their principal bent down, gave them a flower, and said, "I'm proud of you." And then they actually saw her the next morning, and she said, "Good morning, boys and girls," like she always did. And then an hour later, they're crouched under their desks, hearts beating so loud that they feel like the man who is wielding the gun, who is behind the screams and the pleas over the loudspeaker, can hear them, who is clutching the hands of their classmates, crying and thinking, "Mom and Dad, where are you? Mom and Dad, please save me." That was my reality, and by God, there's so many people who are lucky that it wasn't theirs, and that was my parents' reality too. And so I ask you, what is the last time you told your child that you loved them? Do it right after this, I'm telling you right now. This is the reality of gun violence in America. It destroys communities, lives, and families with reckless abandon and without discrimination. Not a single person is immune to what lies in the barrel of a gun. I'm pleading with you today, for anyone listening, for Republican members of Congress who have been inactive for too long, to give hope to give weight to the hope that we have that change will come if only we keep fighting. The Newtown Action Alliance has been fighting this fight for 10 years, and that's too long. Why has it taken 10 years? Why has it taken 20?
That's right.
Stand up for measures that save lives, stand up for your communities, or get out of the way, because there are plenty of us that will. I promise you that. Maxwell Frost is one of them. Perhaps I'll be one of them someday. And there are so many here that will. Thank you all for coming today, and tell your children that you love them. And with that, we're